Well, let's get a bit more on that story now. Jeffrey Smith is a consumer activist and a critic of Monsanto who joins us from Anaheim, California. I suppose you're pleased by the verdict that the court delivered.
Oh, yes, we've been celebrating. In fact, not just the verdict, but the jury trial itself forced Monsanto to release millions of documents where it became very clear that they knew for decades the link between Roundup and its active ingredient glyphosate and cancer. They had been denying it and pointing to studies saying these studies show that it's safe. But the documents that were made public show that they ghost wrote those studies and then paid scientists to put their name on it. So they had rigged the research, they had covered up the evidence, and they continued to do so. But fortunately, the jury heard the truth and awarded a groundskeeper $289 million after using Roundup and getting non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
I'm just having a look at what the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, says. It insists that it's safe when used carefully. The European Food Safety Authority also says glyphosate is unlikely to cause cancer in humans. And these are authorities which have the task of keeping their citizens safe. And yet they're saying it doesn't cause cancer.
The World Health Organization's top cancer committee determined in 2015 that glyphosate is a probable human carcinogen and definitely causes cancer to animals. Also, where it is sprayed in high concentrations, there's an increase of cancer in the population. Now, from the documents that were made public, we realized that Monsanto had a lapdog in the EPA working on its behalf named Jess Rowland. And his name came up and he had a deposition in the court. And it turns out that he was working on behalf of Monsanto to suppress research successfully, and he was in charge of the committee at the EPA that determined that glyphosate was not carcinogenic. However, we also have a letter from a former colleague of Jess Rowland sending him a note saying, I'm dying of cancer and I want to make sure I've done what is right. And I'm going to tell you that glyphosate, by virtue of the research, is certainly a cause of cancer. And you shouldn't be working on behalf of the companies instead of working on behalf of the public. So we have glaring evidence of collusion as well as covering up the evidence from the side of the EPA at the very least.
Just because the EPA isn't here to defend itself, I can imagine that they'd say different, Jeffrey. But I mean, Monsanto itself is still saying that the jury got it wrong. I mean, they said they are sympathetic to Mr. Johnson's predicament, but that the jury got it wrong.
You know, I was there for the closing arguments, and the plaintiff's lawyer put out really clear evidence showing the relationship between the various aspects of the science and non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and how Monsanto systematically hid that evidence. Then Monsanto's attorney came up in a very dramatic way and apparently cut the legs off of every one of those arguments by showing quotes to the opposite. And then the plaintiff's attorney had 35 minutes to turn around. In every case, he showed that Monsanto had cherry-picked phrases within quotes where if you look at the entire document, it's exactly the opposite conclusion. This was there, the jury saw it, that the very basis and foundation of Monsanto's claims of safety turned out not to be true. I debated one of Monsanto's toxicologists on national television in the United States, and she said she backs it up 100%. When we look at the documents made public from the lawsuit, it turns out, she says, we can't say that Roundup doesn't cause cancer. And she also ghost wrote a study and hid the evidence of glyphosate causing miscarriages. So we have plenty of evidence from the inside that's very different than what they say on the outside.
Okay, thank you very much. That's Jeffrey Smith, consumer activist and Monsanto critic in Anaheim.